Welcome. This is a new video series that I'm doing in this new setup, and the reason I'm doing this is because there's a lot of chaos in the world right now. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of people going along with the circus. There's a lot of people who are pointing at that something's wrong with the circus. People are being paranoid. Are there conspiracies? What is happening? And since I've been researching world events and reality and everything that's happening in the world, but also everything that's happening in the spiritual world, I have quite a unique perspective, I would say. And it's up to you to decide. And everything that I will be covering in these videos is for you to look into, not to take my word for it, not to blindly follow whatever I say, or to dismiss everything immediately, but it's for you to make up your own mind. It's for you to do your own research. It's for you to explore certain subjects that you might not have explored before. And I'm just here to guide you into directions that you might not have looked before. So what I want to do with this video series is to go through basically all the important subjects that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis in our daily lives. Everything from health and nutrition to world events to spirituality to self-development to basically everything that we're dealing with right now, like the corona crisis, all the different crises that are going on. I think these things need to be looked at in a different way. I think we need some rational perspectives, and at the same time we need to be able to use our emotional guidance system and our gut to get a feel for what is happening. So both sides of the brain need to be active if you want to be a whole human being, I would say. And what I often see is that people are only using one side, basically, of their brain. But I digress. I think for me to start is to start with how I woke up out of a trance that I was in for basically a big part of my life. For a big part of my life, I was in a sort of trance, which most people are in. And that's not to talk down on those people, because it's just something that happens, something that is engineered, basically, and something that has to do with our evolutionary process as human beings, with our spiritual process. So I was in a trance. I was basically not caring about anything in the world. I was just basically all focused on myself and how bad my problems were. And I basically believed the consensus reality that was fed to me by the public schooling system, by my surroundings, by everyone I came into contact with. There is some kind of consensus reality, a consensus type of reality that most people believe in. It's the frame that most people have when they look at reality. When they look at what's going on, they have a sort of filter, but there's a lot of things that don't pass through the filter, and this filter is focused on certain things that might not be in your best interest, and it's leaving out stuff that you would want to know to make informed decisions for your own life. So how did I wake up? So let's go to my desktop here. There was one particular thing which made me wake up, in a sense, if you want to call it that. And that was this. This is Building 7. This is a building that fell on 9/11. And now before you already have made up your mind, because I'm starting with something about 9/11 and you think, oh, 9/11 conspiracy theories, I'm gonna block this out, I'm gonna move to another video or scroll to a cat video somewhere. Wait a second, because okay, there are people who believe in conspiracy theories around 9/11, and it's already like it's some kind of hobby that you like being into conspiracy theories, just like you like to read comics or something. But that's not what it should be, because either 9/11, this event which kind of changed the world, It basically changed the world in many different aspects. If there's something that is off with this event, if there is something that is not right with this event, that is so big. Because everyone, almost everyone, the consensus reality is the normal official story of what happened on 9/11. But what if that is not the story? So this is a building, in 9/11 there were two towers, the World Trade Center towers, that collapsed that day because there were two planes that flew in one of the buildings, in each one of the buildings. But there was a third tower, which was a very big skyscraper, not as big as the two towers, but a very big skyscraper, Building 7. And that's the one that you see right here on the screen. And that building, later that day, on 9/11, collapsed in its own footprint at virtually free fall speed. Now, there have been many people coming up with all kinds of explanations for this, like scientific explanations. Like there's been the National Institute of Standards and Technology or something, which is was hired by the government to basically come up with a story of how this building could have collapsed. But everyone who trusts their own ability to look at something and to deter and to get a feel for what's going on, who can believe what they see with their own eyes, sees that something is not right here. That this building was not hit by a plane. There were some office fires in this building. But steel-framed skyscrapers have never collapsed due to fire before that day. And that day 3 steel-framed skyscrapers collapsed due to fire. But this building was never hit by a plane. It had some fires in it. Yet it symmetrically collapses to the ground as fast as if you would have dropped a stone from the top of the building. It would have hit the ground as fast as this building hit the ground. That means there was no resistance. That means that it's impossible for it to do that on its own. The columns within that building would have need to be destroyed with explosives for that to have happened. But yeah, that's speculating, right? That's where you're creating conspiracy theories or whatever. But just look at this collapse. Look at it. Look at it. Put it on full screen here. This building goes down at virtually free fall speed. And you almost didn't hear about it in the news. Almost nobody knows about this building. Only people who have looked into 9/11 and further investigated what happened know that that building collapsed. And the way that it collapsed. Now, I don't want to make this a conspiracy theory video about 9/11, but this is the event, like this whole thing, only this, because there's so much more to say about 9/11. But just this, looking with your own eyes, people will tell you, people who believe the consensus reality, they will tell you that this is nothing. They will tell you that, they will just make up some excuse. But just see what the implications of this, only this video, what the implications are for what you believe to be true about what they tell you in the consensus mainstream reality. That a building which had normal office fires in it, like normal office fires, just office fires in it, collapsed in a perfect symmetrical way at free fall speed. So there was no resistance. If you know anything about physics, you know that that's not possible. So that means that there's a lot more to that story, to that event, which changed the world. then people would have you believe. Then the mainstream reality consensus would have you believe. Then the media has told you. Then the politicians have told you. That even some scientists who were hired have told you. And right now, if you to look at the state of the reality which we are living in right now, to look at the state of the world right now, this has never been this bad. This is also why I'm now starting to make these videos again. Is if you look at if you search YouTube for Building 7 collapse. Let's search for YouTube. What you basically get is a lot of videos by mainstream sources, by the government, by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, hired by the government to explain how this could happen. But of course, they're trying to tell you that fire is water. They're telling you that fire is water. They're telling you that black is white. They're telling you that you cannot trust your own rational ability to look at that and to say that can't happen. You don't need science to know that. You don't need that. And if you think you do, I would say you have been fooled to always look up at authorities to tell you what reality is, to tell you what's true and untrue, to tell you that you have to listen to them because they will tell you what reality is. Oh, I want to interject here for a second, and I want to clarify that what I'm saying here is not that we shouldn't value science and that we shouldn't trust science, because real science is an amazing tool. However, we shouldn't rely on experts to always tell us what reality is. We shouldn't always look up at authorities and think, oh well, that's just some major scientific journal, so their study must be right. Or those scientists, they're scientists, so they must be right. That's where it becomes a religion. That's where it becomes that you are seeing them as some kind of high priest telling you what reality is, instead of you actually skeptically looking at whatever it is that they present and actually seeing if they are using the right methods, the right data, and to come up with conclusions of your own, to do your own research, because that's very important. I also want to say that when it comes to the collapse of the World Trade Center towers, the 2 towers and the 3rd tower that fell that day, Building 7, there are over 3,000 architects and engineers who are putting their name and reputation on the line to speak out about the collapse of these buildings, and they are providing scientific evidence that they could not have collapsed the way that they did based on what we're told in the official story. They have proven this with real science, and they are really putting they don't have any financial gain by actually telling you about this. They are putting their name and their job and their function and everything on the line to actually speak out about this, because they also see that this is impossible. But you don't need to be an architect or an engineer to see that. And that's the point I'm trying to make. That's the point, because we're always looking up at experts, but we don't actually need those experts in these cases. You have to be able to trust your own capability to see what is true and what is false. So this is what woke me up. This whole event, not just Building 7, but Building 7 is like the smoking gun of 9/11. And we've already had so many different new events which completely are like changing the way we live. So looking at 9/11 is almost like looking at some old dusty thing, some old dusty book you have on the shelf somewhere. But it's really relevant. It's really relevant because if you understand that something like that can be manipulated. That the way you look at such an event, the story they have told you about that event, worldwide, not just in the US, not just in one country, worldwide, this is the consensus that 9/11 was just done by some terrorists who flew 2 planes in buildings, and there's nothing else going on. If that is a lie, how many things in your life have you taken as the truth from authorities you thought you could trust, and which are also lies? Because this is what shook my world when I really looked into this and thought, what are the implications of this? Because you can see like a YouTube video, right? You can see like a YouTube video, and you can think, oh yeah, that's a video, or oh yeah, oh wow, 9/11, well, there must be some conspiracy or whatever. But just try to think, what kind of implications does this have for my life, for the way I look at life, for the way I look at reality, for the way I look at the mainstream, the media, politics, everything. Because if this is a lie, and everyone believes it, almost everyone, let's say maybe the tides are shifting a bit right now, then how many things are also lies that you've just been taught and never questioned? Or maybe you questioned them once and you looked up at YouTube or Google and you searched it, and there the first hit was like some website or video from an authoritative source telling you that what you thought is untrue. They did the fact checking for you. You don't need to do any fact checking anymore. They just told you it's all BS. It's all BS. So you can just go and live your life again and trust all the authorities again, because they told you what reality is. Do you see what's wrong with that? Do you see how that can actually hurt you? How that can hurt your life? How that can actually create this mess that we're in right now? Because we are in a mess right now. But that's okay, because this mess is here to wake us up. This mess that we're in right now with this whole corona thing, we're gonna go into that in later videos, but it's here to wake us up. But right now, our society, and it's been this for a very long time, so I think we're living in really great times in that sense, because more and more people are starting to see that something is not right. But the problem is, and what I see happening a lot, is that once people start questioning these mainstream narratives, they sometimes really go off the deep end. They sometimes start to become really, really paranoid. And it is very hard. It can be earth-shattering, life-shattering, however you want to call it. It can be very, very difficult thing, this waking up process, or whatever you want to call it. Becoming aware that things are not as they seem. A lot of things are not as they seem. It's a very, very hard process on yourself, and you need to do a lot of self-development and spiritual development to be able to get through it, and it actually empowering your life. And that's why I feel it's needed to talk about these things, but to also talk about self-development, to talk about spiritual development, and to make sure that when you are going through this process, or if maybe you're already in the process, that you have all the tools you need to stay sane and not become some paranoid kook with a tinfoil hat. And because a lot of these things, they go really, really deep, and there's a lot of truth to be found. But there's always two sides, and yet there's always polarity in our reality. So you don't want to go too much off the deep end, and you also don't want to become like this mind-controlled slave. So you want to be able to use rational thinking, use your emotional guidance system, and combine both to find truth and to live an empowered life. So let's switch to the society, a nice allegory, the allegory of the cave, by Plato. And this is basically a story, like a nice metaphor for our society and what's happening. Basically, the story goes, there's this group of prisoners who have been chained for their whole life in a cave, watching a wall. And behind them, there is a fire, which gives light to the wall that they're watching on the cave. They basically see all the shadows on the wall, and they think that is reality. They're watching shadows on a wall, and those shadows are moving, and they think that is reality. They don't know that there's a whole reality like behind them, and even when you leave the cave, there is this whole world out there. They just only know the shadows on the wall. And I believe the story goes that one of the prisoners escapes and basically sees that there's this whole world behind them. And he tries to warn or to tell the other prisoners that there's this whole world around them. And I believe the story goes that they kill him because they don't want to be confronted with something that destroys their worldview. And I think this is very telling. I think this story is beautiful because it's basically the world we are living in right now, in my opinion. And it's something that I want to be able to provide you with, is to show you more about the world that's going on behind that fire, and when you leave the cave. And there's so much more going on than just the shadows on the wall. And most people who blindly believe authorities and who believe the consensus reality that they have been propagated their whole lives by the system is hurting them. It's not reality. It's not what's really going on. And I don't want to claim like I am the sole authority on the truth and that I know everything. I don't know everything, but I've been at this. I woke up to these things 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, I believe. And I've been going through a whole process, and I've basically gone full circle. I've like stopped looking into world events for a long time and stopped following everything that's going on in the world in the past few years. But right now, I feel a drive and a fire within me to basically pick up those things again, because it's really needed right now. Because everything that's happening around us in the world right now is going very, 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 very fast. So we need to equip ourselves with the right knowledge, the right tools to deal with this and to create a better future for ourselves and the whole of humanity. So I want to leave it at this. Maybe I gave you some food for thought about life, about looking at things differently. And just think about if you see like something which conflicts with the way you view the world. Don't just avoid it. Don't just put your head in the sand. Try to look at it objectively. And maybe there's a lot of BS you're looking at. There is a lot of BS. It's very hard to search through that and to find the truth. But you can and you will if you actually are open-minded enough to look. So yeah, and think about what the implications can be. Like that video I showed you about Building 7. And what if 9/11 is not as they told you it was? How big are the implications? Don't just look at that event, look at all the implications for the way you have been fed reality by the mainstream media, by the schooling system, your parents, by your friends, like movies. Everything is telling you, basically, most of it is telling you this consensus type of reality. Like, there is like some mainstream narrative, but there are different narratives, and there's different things to look at that they're trying to avoid you. They're trying to push you towards their views. They're trying to push you towards this mainstream authoritative view. Just like when I look for Building 7 collapse on YouTube, it took me a long time to find a good video where I actually see the collapse. Because most of it is just CNN, ABC News, Time. Like, it's incredible. It's incredible. This 5 years ago, this was not the case. You could actually look up things which go against the mainstream narrative. But now they make it so very hard for you to do this. I hope that this video was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.